Welcome to the Wellness Growth Code podcast. I'm your host, Justine, and this is where we talk to leaders in the health and wellness space about what's actually driving growth right now, from visibility to smarter systems to AI. No fluff, just real insights you can take and use in your own business. So let's dive into it. Today's guest is Yael Eiserike. She's a therapist working with attorneys navigating burnout, anxiety, and high-pressure careers. What makes her different is that she's lived it. She was a lawyer before becoming a therapist, so she understands the reality, not just the theory. Now she helps lawyers move beyond stress and build careers that are actually sustainable. So let's dive in. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So can you give us a bit of a snapshot, like how your journey started and when you made that transition?
I became a lawyer because I was always a good student. I was between law and psychology even as a college student, and opted for law because it was more prestigious, more demanding. It appealed to me in a number of ways. And I went in, I was very idealistic. I enjoyed law school. I got a job at a big firm, and everything was moving along as it was supposed to. I did start to notice some feelings of, oh, okay, I feel a little bit empty, a little bit wondering what's next. Is this sort of all there is? And this really came to a head when I had a case that went to trial. And I live in Southern California, and it was in Northern California, so it was about a 6-hour drive. And this was in times really before smartphones or consistent podcasts, and I was driving through rural parts of California, just sitting with myself and thinking. Twice a week for about 6 weeks, because I was still marathon training in LA, so I had to come back home to go for long runs, and just thinking. All it did was force me to think and think and think, and finally realize I'm not happy. This isn't what I'm meant to do with my life. This doesn't feel like something that is soul-filling, but in some ways kind of soul-crushing. I'm going to trial, which as a litigator is supposed to be the most exciting, the best, the biggest, and it didn't do that for me. And so when I was really honest with myself about who I was and what my goals were and what I valued, it was to help people and to really be a support to folks. And so when I finally realized this wasn't the place for me, I went back to graduate school. I got my master's in social work and went and worked in a community mental health agency. I helped kids and adults with lots of trauma, loved the work that I was doing, and still always had this part of my life that I wasn't using, that I wasn't connecting with, that just kind of lingered in the background. And so I ended up, like a lot of folks in 2020, kind of having a little bit of a shift in my career, and I went into private practice and realized that I love working with lawyers. Many of my friends are still attorneys. I know the community, I know the language, I know the realities of it, and I realized this was the perfect way to fuse these two parts of my life together in a way that's been really meaningful and incredible, and just has felt like the natural place I was meant to be.
That's so amazing that you could fuse those two worlds together. I wanted to know, what are some of the pressures lawyers experience that people outside the profession may not fully understand? Like you talked about, like the burnout and anxiety. Can you talk us through that a little bit?
So one of the things I had even noticed in myself is that to be a good lawyer is to catastrophize. It's to imagine absolutely the very worst thing that could ever happen and to prevent it. Right? If you're drafting a contract, if you have a case going to trial, it's imagining all of the terrible scenarios and planning for them, which is a great skill to have. Unfortunately, what that means is that that is a skill that people are using all the time, and that's how they're approaching life. And so it's a lot of catastrophizing, imagining the worst. So there's a lot of constant churning and ruminating and thinking about things in a way that it's hard to turn it off. I imagine other careers are like that too, but particularly for law, because it's reinforced, because it's a necessary skill. And so that's one thing I would say fairly unique to attorneys. The adversarial nature of the profession can be really grueling, because your classmates, your colleagues to some extent are your competitors, and so that can be really lonely for some people. And then I think there's something about the problem-solving, fixing component of law that is, hey, you didn't make this mess, but now it's your job to figure out how to fix it. And that can be really, really stressful. The culture of law is just very, very intense and very demanding, which can be very engaging, hard to turn off. So for lawyers, it's hard sometimes to take a vacation, not away from the office, but away from their minds, where they're still thinking about all of the things that they've been deeply engrossed in for the last X amount of time. And so it's helpful to have some lived experience and to have some expertise with that, to be able to give people more practical tools so that they do have the time to recharge and disconnect outside of work.
Yeah, I think that the understanding is so important where you're coming from. One of the mothers that's in my son's class, she's a high-powered lawyer, and I just see her working night and day, like she's got a big case, and I'm like, that is just must be so hard, like the stress and raising a family and trying to make partner, et cetera, et cetera.
It's
So,
it's
so I
hard.
guess building your business too, like, can you currently, like, how do clients find you? What's your, like, is it just through word of mouth or through your past community?
Psychology Today is helpful to have as far as directory listings, and other directory listings can be helpful as well. Word of mouth has been really powerful, both past clients, current clients, but also even inquiry calls that have liked me, that have connected with me, and for whatever reason it hasn't worked out. I've also gotten a lot of referrals from psychiatrists and other treatment providers I've collaborated with, other therapists that I have, that I've worked with also in the past. And then the website and other sort of online marketing is certainly helpful to build out a full picture.
And when you started building your practice, what have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way?
So, in terms of the lessons, one, be okay with saying no. I think I've learned that I would much rather say no to something I don't feel totally resonates with me or doesn't feel comfortable or is in any way kind of questionable than to say yes and then regret it later. I'm in a fortuitous position that I can say no to clients if it feels like it's the wrong fit. But I also think it's important to do that because there's nothing worse than starting therapeutic work that can be deeply vulnerable and connecting, and to realize, oh, this person needs some kind of specialized treatment I don't offer, or they need something that is maybe a higher level of care, or their priorities may not, you know, their what they want to work on may not necessarily match what I think needs to be worked on. So, for example, I've once had the experience of having someone who was having some fairly significant suicidal ideation who wanted to work on relationship issues, which I think are important, but not as important as obviously safety. And so I think it's important to make sure that both people are on the same page, that there's trust, and saying no sometimes can be difficult, especially when first starting. But I would rather say no than, afterwards have a difficult rupture in the relationship.
Yeah, I think that's so important everywhere in life to say no. That's what I have to try and learn to do a little bit better. Otherwise, you run ragged.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And the only one who's miserable is yourself. So, what would you say are some of your proudest moments that you've had so far? Like, does anything stand out in growing your business?
A lot of individual client moments that obviously I'm not going to disclose here, but moments where clients have made big life decisions that they've been working towards for a long time, or when they've been faced with a relationship pattern where normally they would zig and instead this time they zagged. Those are kind of individually, clinically really significant for me. But in terms of on the business side, I think one of my proudest achievements has been hiring two therapists and bringing them on board. It's been a new sort of stage of growth that I didn't really know that I was working towards, and it happened organically, and it's been wonderful since it happened, and it's been a wonderful challenge for myself.
Yeah. Are they all based in the same location?
I'm licensed in California, Washington, D.C., and Virginia.
Yeah.
They are currently both just in California.
And that's what, I mean, coming from a different country, it's so interesting that you have to be licensed in that state. Would you say that's one of the biggest challenges?
Certainly, it's a challenge. I've had clients who've moved away who've said, "Oh, I'd love to keep working with you," which I can't. Or clients who have reached out to me because they've heard about me from their friend, but they live in a jurisdiction in which I'm not licensed. So, definitely, it's been really difficult.
But I guess from a founder's perspective, what has surprised you the most about running your own business? I guess you probably just said you didn't realize you're going to hire two people. Congratulations. Yeah.
I would say the other thing is how much more time I'm spending on just marketing and networking and doing a lot of the business maintenance, accounting and all that sort of thing, rather than the clinical work.
Yeah, that's the reason why I started this podcast, because a lot of people are great at what they do. They're great therapists, they're great wellness and health founders, but then they have to, practitioners, they have to put on this CEO hat and do it all. And you're not taught that at school. So,
No, no, definitely not.
yeah. So I guess if you had a magic wand now and you could change anything in your business or improve any bottlenecks, where would you say? Like, is it the marketing, or is there anything that springs out for you?
I think one thing that I would certainly have done sooner would have been to do some of the marketing sooner. I was a little bit reluctant at first only because there's an investment right away, and I just wanted to be really thoughtful and cautious and responsible about financial decisions. But I wish I had sort of invested in that a little bit sooner. I think the other piece that I am glad that I did is that I know my own limitations, and so hiring experts from the outset has been something I've never regretted. So, hiring attorneys, hiring an accountant, like hiring experts in their respective fields to help provide support and not having to learn all of these things at once. And despite my having been a lawyer, I never did any of the kind of legal work that I've now needed. And so I'd rather just entrust that to someone who all they do is that kind of work.
I think that's so important and saves yourself so many headaches down the road too, even though I know it is an up cost front. But yeah, everyone I spoke to that has invested has saved a lot in the other end. I guess one thing we're also exploring on this podcast is like how technology and AI are beginning to shape all service businesses too. Are you seeing any role for AI in mental health, whether it's screening, administration? Are you using it, or do you think, are you cautious about it?
I'm very cautious about it. I am not using it. I know there's clinicians out there who have different perspectives on how much they allow for AI in terms of note taking or record keeping or even recording of sessions. I don't do any of that. I made it really clear with my new colleagues that's also not allowed. I know that I have some clients who have used AI themselves outside of session of, hey, I had this thing and I wanted to sort of use it as a sounding board to talk through whatever issue is, and then they bring it to session and we talk about it, and that has been okay. I would be concerned about what the nature of the thing is that they might be taking to AI. I'm very, very, very cautious of having AI in the clinical space in terms of actual sort of stand in as a therapist. Very, very, very concerned about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. I mean, I have seen some horrific stories, floating around. So keeping it old school is the way. Yeah.
Yeah. I would rather spend a little extra time, but just make sure that things are done properly. There's no privacy issues. I personally don't do that only because I understand my calendar well, and so if I know that I'm going to be having some heavier sessions that day, I may not want to schedule a meeting or a consultation call or something with someone during that day, even though a time may be available, just because I want to be able to take care of myself and make sure I can give my best self to my clients.
I mean, we use AI heavily, but sometimes I'm getting all these things booked in my diary, exactly what you're talking to. And I'm like, oh, I have to pick up the kids. And like, no, I can't do that then. And then it is creating more work because you're having to go back and email everyone individually. So I think there is still an element of babysitting to it. And I do think in some ways it helps with efficiency. So yeah, the good
Yeah,
and
I could see a benefit to it, but just with caution.
especially in your industry. And I guess, looking ahead for the next 5 years, what would you like to see change in the legal profession around burnout and mental health?
I think having more open conversations about the toll that some of this work takes on people, what expectations are in terms of availability outside of work. Before before my day, even before people had smartphones or even necessarily had internet, when an attorney went home, they had their home phone. Like, yeah, they might be working and reading on and writing and researching, but they might just be able to be with their family. And unfortunately, with technology, that's been lost quite a bit. So I would like the legal profession to try to create some guardrails there to protect attorneys. I've had clients who've told me about horrific numbers of hours worked, like absolutely just disgusting amounts of hours, and that may be okay in spurts, but not as a consistent, ongoing, regular thing. I mean, I've had clients who've had all kinds of responses to it, both physical and psychiatric, and that can't be the normal.
Yeah, well, I guess the body can only be pushed so far before it actually breaks or something breaks. Gosh,
Absolutely.
if people want to find out more about your work or use your services or connect, what is the best way to get in touch?
They can always email me, so it's Yael at yaeleiseric.com. They can visit my website, yaeleiseric.com, or even a phone call, 310-359-0320. That's me. Feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your insights into a different space that I don't know a lot about. Congratulations on everything you've created
Thank
so
you.
far and everything I know you're going to create. And yeah, thanks for being on the Wellness Growth Code podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.